Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings be unto you all. I am Minister Jamie Eatman, and I am on the rise. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Who is the us? I am joined by my co-hosts, Brother Gregory Polk. And today should be a promising program, and I'm looking very much looking forward to it. But we always begin with prayer. Let us do so now. Most Holy Father, we most humbly come before you, giving you honor, giving you glory, and giving you praise. And Father, we know that this is the day that you have made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. We're grateful for all that you have brought us through, that which we have come to, and that which you will lead us through. So, right now, Father, we just pray that you'll bless this program as we go through it, as we come before you right now. Everyone that shall hear this now or later, I ask that you would forgive us for any sins we've committed, none to forgive us for our trespasses, not only we, but our seed and the seed of our seeds as well. We pray that you will just open eyes, ears, minds, and hearts, that something will be said that will be a blessing to someone, that it might indeed educate, motivate, or inspire them to rise above certain situations or circumstances in their life. I pray everything that's going to be said and done will be to your honor and to your glory. It's in the spirit of Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, all right. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great.
That's good. You sent me some great information there. I was reading over that. My wife says, "Greetings, Minister and Brother Gregory. Peace and blessings, Lady
Greetings,
Antoinette. Thank you for
greetings.
joining us." All right. I always look up there for that, at least one, to know that nobody else is there. Lady Antoinette's there. So that's a blessing. Brother Gregory, you sent me some information earlier.
Yes,
Um,
I did.
how did you come across that? Tell me about it.
I came across that when searching for things to do for Black History Month,
Okay.
and I fell down the rabbit hole of our U.S. history,
Okay.
and the title alone was enough for me to share to multiple people. And I knew about that story, but I forgot. I completely forgot about that story, and I'm glad that came up during my search of Black history. Uh, that it popped up and it reminded me of our past.
Okay. How about our president? Is it in any way associated or affiliated with our president as well?
Yes, it's associated because um, now that all the information is out about what happened to the Black Panther, that video that I sent you shows you how strategic the government is towards keeping Black people down, like very strategic to the point of planting Black people in the Black community that we think we can trust, but they turn out to be people that work for the government and gave us up, if you will.
Okay.
And come to find out that one of the original Black Panthers, he he's still in jail. He's still there off
Hmm.
of trumped up charges. And it's sad that he got arrested at 19 years old and he's still there. Like after all the facts have come out, he's still there. And that's a problem. And if you can't see that as an American, then you're not woke enough.
Okay. That's the phrase today. Everybody want to be woke, but we're still sleeping through some things. I like the way you said that,
Hmm.
Brother Greg. As I listened to you just now, the thing that stood out was the person that, as you say, is still in jail. Bondage is really amazing, and people don't realize how bondage work. We get to a point where there's some things that some of us miss out of ignorance. Because when you said that, my first thought was, uh, even with what you sent, I didn't get a chance to read it all, but I didn't know that there would have been someone still in jail at age 19. So a lot of us don't know. And I guess that's really something to think about, because as I
Hmm.
said, this program is about there's work to be done, but before we can begin to work, we must be aware of the job. Some of us think, it's all done, it's been settled, but really it hasn't. And if we're going to be able to bring about a change, we got to know what has occurred before us, because it's our day. And if whatever we do now, we're sort of setting the stage for those that are going to come behind us. And if
Hmm.
we're get behind, what is this? If he who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind, or run faster than the man in front, and that
I
becomes
agree.
very important. So we need to be aware of that. And my thing is, as I looked at that, it caused me to look for some things. And what I looked for was I put in some information, and it said that and you may already know this, that the Black Panthers had a 10-point plan. Are you
Yep,
familiar with that?
I am very familiar with it.
And that 10-point plan, I was interested to look at it, because, and then I felt almost like, wow, should I avoid this topic or what? Because, when you start looking at history and some things occur, you want to be careful of your timeline. Because when you look at the Black Panthers and Dr. King and all the things that was going on, it seemed like who preceded who? That was my first question. Because I remember watching something where it said how I think it was Dr. King, and there was someone that was younger that kept showing up at the same place he was, and they were
Hmm.
about wasn't Black Panthers, it was Black Power. I think it probably evolved from there, but that was during his lifetime. And he had kind of commented on the young people, and what their mindset was, but how they lacked certain wisdom, and how um, harmful some of their actions could be. But lo and behold, as life would unfold, he and Brother Malcolm was killed. And I watched the video, and the way that video brought it together was amazing, because
Hmm.
as it talked about how they both were killed, and then how behind them the Black Panther came on the scene. And
Correct.
that was really interesting for a whole lot of reasons. But those are narratives there, and if a person doesn't know the narrative, what do you think about them even being a part of the conversation?
I don't think they have much to say because the first thing you have to understand is um, no matter what you have heard in the past about the Black Panther group, um, the truth is out. The truth is out. The Black Panthers were nothing but protectors of their community. They
Correct.
literally were formed to protect their community, and the government strategically struck them down one by one,
Right.
and they gave out false narratives saying, "Oh, they're dangerous and they're feeding the children poison and this, that, and the third," and literally the only reason why it was formed is to protect them from the police that were killing and slaughtering black people. And the history behind that, like I was doing research more specifically because I heard a pastor say this. He said, in order for you to move forward in life and not to be tricked again and over and over and over, you have to know your enemy. If you don't know your enemy, you're gonna get tricked over and over and over, and because they're gonna come up with new ways to trick you.
Hmm.
And so I was like, well, he's absolutely right. You got to know your enemy. And so um, I've been alive long enough to see the transition from black people marching. Literally, I was a little kid when the last Million Man March happened, uh, till now, where the people that try to organize something are end up being defrauded. Like when BLM happened, I was all for it. I was like, man, they about to rise up again, just like Black Panthers. But then you come to find out the leaders of BLM movement were nothing but frauds. They were just taking people's money and running with it. And in my head, I was thinking, I think they probably had initial good intentions, but nobody saw the plant that the government put in there for to the enemy. Nobody saw the enemy because they had the same skin color as them. Actually, he didn't have the same skin color. He was light, really light skin. He was albino. But the point being is, when you know your enemy, you know what they look like, and you know it. You don't have to know. You don't have to have the same skin color as them, but you know what your enemy looks like. They move different. They act different. They'll say one thing and it's too good to be true, and you're like, no, something ain't right. I need to keep your eye on you. And
Right.
so the pastor he was saying, you have to know your enemy, but at the same time, you have to keep your eye on God. Because when John walked out on the water, as soon as he took his eye off of God, he started to drown.
Right.
And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
he said, keep your eye on God, but know your enemy.
Right. I laugh, Brother Greg, because you say when John walked out on the water, Peter walked out. When Peter
I'm sorry,
walked
you're
out on the
right. It
water.
was Peter.
Yeah. But you got a very good point there, and it also reminds me of a phrase. I always mess it up. My wife and I had this discussion about, does it say keep your enemies close and your friends closer, or your friends close and your enemies closer? But she explained the logic of it to me. But the thought of that statement saying that you really putting them in the same sentence, unless you have to be aware of both, because
Hmm.
that's usually how the enemy gets you. He plants a spy or something that's contrary to what you're doing, and if they're with you every move or ahead of you every move, you know that something is wrong in your camp, and that is definitely a problem. Makes you very vulnerable, easily defeated. I'd like to thank those of you who all have joined us, and those of you who shall be watching this later. We're talking about there's work to be done. We haven't gotten to that work yet, but actually we're actually doing that work, because as just stated, if a person doesn't know, it's like, why should they be with you? They don't know that. And why shouldn't they oppose you? Or why should they oppose the person that you're opposed? My enemies, my friends' enemies aren't necessarily my enemy. I look at my friends closer before I go befriending or making enemies of their friends or enemies, because people are like that. You got to always make sure that you are in the position of being right. I love that comment about keeping your eyes on God, because when you think about keeping your eyes on God, it's reassuring to know that God's eyes is always on you. So that's a big plus. And when you get to the point where you don't know that, you're lucky if you don't know God and you don't know that. But when you come to know God and your eyes aren't on God, then you might end up being in opposition of God. And it'd be just as bad for someone that don't know Him, but they wouldn't know. But when you know that you better act like you know. All right. So the narrative, we've been talking about the narrative, and I kind of thought that the narrative would be a topic we'll deal with for a good time forward. And I went and I actually saw this 10-point plan. And when I saw the 10-point plan, I said, wow, now this is something, this 10-point plan.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring it up here so I can add some of these bullets in the room. But it was really something to read about that. But you know what really was interesting? When I looked it up, um, I actually asked, first I went to AI and I asked it about the plan, and it gave me these two plans. And then I asked it to give me the actual plan. And it
Hmm.
was interesting because what it gave me as the actual plan, it was written from more of a, I guess you might say, a more intellectual perspective, because one, it gave me these two to choose from, and one of them was like detailed, and the other one like just make general statements. You want to get people out of jail. That ain't saying nothing. anyone that knows about crime, they're going to have a problem with that. No, why do you want to get them out of jail? But when you make reference to people that have been unjustly incarcerated without any
Hmm.
trials, that becomes a whole different conversation. So, and that was a portion of kind of what I read. What stood out most for you as it pertains to that?
Well, what stood out for me with the 10-point plan, and it's usually brought up to my attention roughly every year or every other year uh, around Black History Month. And it's the fact that we usually, as a people, can't get past four before we start seeing obstacles. And I believe four or five is the one that talks about education and to give us education and um, basically it teaches us our true history and our role in today in present day society. Like even today, our history is very blurred and skewed. They're very quick, like white people are very quick to tell us, "Oh, black people had slaves." Uh-huh. And they're very quick to say that. They want to bring that art, they want to bring that part of history. But then as soon as we bring up reparations, then
Reparations.
all of a sudden they get all, oh, why? Well, I didn't have nothing to do with slavery, so why should I pay reparations? Because the check is still due. That's why. The
Right.
check is still due. We didn't
Mhm.
put in all this work and nobody paid the check. No one cut us our check for all the work we put in. That's what reparations is. I mean, it's a very
Right.
very broad way of saying it, but that's basically the gist of it. Like we were brought here to work for nothing.
Hmm.
And you laugh and joke all you want about it, but the bottom line is we're here because people forced us to be here. And
Right.
we may have walked on the boat because we were tricked, but when we wanted to leave, they said no, you can't leave. And we're still being shot and gunned down by the police that was created to stop black people from running. Literally, they were created to stop black people from running, and
Hmm.
somehow there are people my age and older that still don't get it. The police are not our friends. It don't matter how many black folks they hire, they are not our friends. They were not created to bring law and order. They were created to stop black people from running. That was literally their job. And it's still their job today. As soon as a black person speak up and say, "Nah, that ain't right," they hit us across the head with a baton, or they shoot us in the chest, or we say we're not armed, we don't have any weapons on us, and they shoot us anyway.
Right.
So it's still happening today,
Right.
and people need to wake up. Oh, I'm woke. No, you're not woke because you not fighting, you're not doing your research, you're not educating yourself about the real history that has happened here in America. So we have the internet. Everybody has access to the internet. If you can just get past that fifth one and start educating yourselves with the free internet that's out there, then you'll start to realize that those 4 points that were already old, we need to move forward into 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. But we got
Right.
to get past five. We got to educate ourselves because they ain't gonna give us no education. They're not gonna tell us what's real. We got to educate ourselves.
Right. And for those of you who will watch this and you won't know what my brother is talking about, I'm going to drop a link in the room. But we're talking about 1966, and that's when the Black Panthers were supposedly have put together what is called the Black Panthers Party 10-point program. And I had an uncle that was a Black Panther. I didn't know it, and I used to always see the tattoo he had on his arm, which was weird because none of my other uncles have ever had tattoos. And he was more the loud type. He said what he said, but I kind of contributed to it might have been the fact that he was the youngest of the group. But I will never forget that tattoo. I think it was either on his arm, his chest, or back, or somewhere. But I never thought to ask him about it. But as I was reading that, um, it just something dropped into my spirit that that's what he was, that he was a Black Panther. Because when you kind of read what they stood for, it really it says a lot. When we look at basically at history, most of us, Black history, we hear about Dr. King. And Brother Gregory, when you said that you hear about that every year, the 10 points, I can honestly admit I had never really seen them, made an active search for them, and probably in very little conversation had point reference made to them. So what I did is I went and printed those out and I read over them, and I thought, wow, this is powerful. And as I read over those 10 points, I thought about, ongoing the battle. When you look at that, it gives you some guidelines, more or less. When I heard about the civil rights, and from what I had heard from Dr. King about the young people coming up, and how he was at certain rallies, and the younger people were there and they would bring guns, and how conflict that put how it kind of jeopardized what the movement was about. That's one thing with movements. You have to make sure you're doing the right thing at the right time. If this is the plan, you need to stick with it. If someone comes along and they are doing A and the idea was to do B, it presents a problem because people might have tolerated A, or A might have earned a certain place or position, but here comes B now. So when you think about that, and what are your thoughts, Brother Gregory, concerning this? If you had civil rights, Dr. King, nonviolence, Malcolm X, his strong position, Nation of Islam, they didn't quite believe in violence, but if you brought it to them, they were there to stand their ground. And those two leaders being taken out, and all of a sudden, time and what was going on. Because, if you think about, the Bible says that when you cut off the head, when you cut the head off, that everything else is supposed to scatter. So Dr. King being the head, Malcolm being the head, and here they are, these individuals that are left behind. When you see something like that, can you see how the need for something to evolve with some semblance of opposition for those things that stood against justice, those things that stood against freedom, those things that stood against rights that were earned at that time? Do you see that there was a place that a need for the Panthers when the Panthers came out?
Right. It was a definite need because soon thereafter, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were killed. They started popping Black folks left and right, and they put us in neighborhoods to kind of corral us together, and then when we start to say that these neighborhoods, it's not enough for us, we need to have a way of working and getting up out of these neighborhoods. And they wouldn't give us loans to get out the neighborhood. They wouldn't give us jobs to work our way out the neighborhood, but then they want to come and shoot us. So the Black Panther said, well, shoot, we ain't gonna put up with that. And the Black Panthers literally did nothing but good for the community. They were literally a wall of strong Black men that were standing up and saying, if you want to come, if you want to come through this neighborhood, you're going to have to leave your gun on the outside of this wall. And they didn't put up with nobody else doing that. And,
Right.
if you were to say, if you were to just mutter the word Black Panther in let's see when I was in school in 1995, 1996, it was about the time when I first discovered Black Panther. I knew about them, but I didn't really know because I was just a kid. It was about 95, 96. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I start to learn Black Panther. You know, Pookie Williams, he wrote children's books back then, and I started reading the children's books. And Hugh Freeman, I started hearing about him. You know, and him being the one of the leaders of Black Panther. And I start hearing these stories about the Black Panthers. And my logical mind is saying, well, they were doing nothing but protecting their family. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand what's going on, why they got locked up. And I didn't even have all the information, but I knew someone went right. I knew
Right.
someone right.
Mm-hmm.
And it don't, you know, it took my adolescent mind to figure out that something wasn't right back then in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, they were still holding on to strong black men in prison because they framed them for shooting somebody, or they framed them with trumped up charges from, you know, prior years or something that somebody lied about. And they have the nerve to say, as a matter of fact, I saw the DA's speech in 2018 about releasing this Black Panther. He said, well, what we're talking about is a man that killed police. And the truth already came out saying he actually didn't do nothing. He was in a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
state when this happened.
Wow.
And the person that killed him wasn't him. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, this man's being held because of a crime he didn't commit, and it's been proven that he didn't commit. But you hear out the prosecutor's mouth that he still is saying that he committed murder.
Mm-hmm.
That's that that blows my mind. And so now, mind you, this happened in 2018. Here it is, 2025, and uh, the last few Black Panthers are just being released.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sad that they had to spend the majority of their life, because they were teenagers when they got locked up. Some of them were either very young, like 21, 22 years old, or even in the teenagers being locked up for things they didn't really commit. Like one, he
Right.
got locked up for stealing a ice cream from an ice cream man, and that's how they decided to go in and shoot him. And that's just, it's sad, but it's still happening today. It's still happening today. Like, people don't understand, it's still happening today. As soon as black people start to organize, they drop a plant in that midst of them, and people don't recognize that they're a plant. They don't recognize that they're not for them, and then what their positive movement turns into a scandal. Their scandal gets blown up. It gets thrown out of proportion, and people start to discredit the people that are trying to do good. It happens every single time. As soon as black people start to organize because of some tragedy that happened to black people, they drop a plant right in the midst of them to disorganize them.
Right. You said something that's important. After something happened, you know, I'm reminded of the few times I did witness, and one particularly because it was live, issues pertaining to the Black Lives Movement. And when I went out there, I personally was very critical of it because when I see people marching with such energy, enthusiasm, and emotions, and the cry is, "What's their name?" and all we're doing is repeating the names of people that have been killed. There really wasn't a call to action in a lot of ways, if you ask me. Um,
Hmm.
I could really care less about who agree or disagree with that. Um, so when I saw it, I saw disharmony. But what I did see was a catalyst. It was an opportunity that if somebody can seize that moment and breathe some life into it, you might get a fire that burned beyond the flame.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look back on it, it was so short lived. And the thought of lives still being lost, it makes you wonder, how did they manage that? You know, how did the media, if you want to blame it on the media, whoever you want to blame it on, how did they achieve that? That with all that emotion, all that was going on, how did they put that out? And if you think back, you know, the media is a powerful source. And there are a lot of people that love attention. Camera come around, and you know, they had people there that were talking and really wasn't saying anything. And because there was no real cry, all they was repeating was the names and same statement. There's a real battle and a forward battle. And if
Mm-hmm.
you ask me, there was really not much of a forward battle because there was no plan. As you used that term, Brother Gregory, there was no strategy. I don't think anyone took or used that time to come up with a strategy. What do you think?
Right. I can tell you exactly what happened.
Hmm.
And it's going to sound very far fetched, but it's actually what happened. So BLM started because of George Floyd. That
Right.
he was the catalyst that broke. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. He started it, and it was just when it started, they said we need to like reform these police, make them go back to training. Like they need to stop this violence. And then literally 2 weeks after he was killed, a little boy was shot. A week after that, a girl was shot. A week after, they were literally killing black people so fast that black people got afraid to march. And then not only black people, they started killing anybody that was on that BLM side.
Right.
It was like if you look at the numbers, they were literally, it was about one person every week as long as this Black Lives Movement was happening. They were killing folks. They were killing white folks too. Even the ones that supported black people said, "Yes, you're right. They're right. This is too much." They literally pushed a man down, an elderly man down, and busted his head on the sidewalk in front of the camera, and nothing happened to that police officer. They did that on camera and nothing happened. So they did that strategically to show black people it don't matter what you do, we still gonna stop you. And
Right.
then black people kept trying to fight, they kept going, and then they said, okay, they still coming. We're gonna drop some plants in here. And they made people that had nothing to do with BLM go up in there just like they did in Black Panthers, find out who's who, and then started getting information about people to blackmail them. Then the people that got blackmailed, they said, "Well, this is not worth losing my family over," and they fell back. And then uh, they were literally stealing the money. People said, "Well, let's pay these lawyers to get the reform to start going." They took that money and they bought themselves TVs. They were just giving it to whoever, knowing they wouldn't do any good with it. And
Right.
it sounds very far fetched. It sounds like a movie book. These things actually happen. There was a black man right here in Atlanta. He took the money that was supposed to be paid to the lawyers to stop Cop City from being built, and he bought himself some big screen TVs and cars. Literally.
Right.
Then in California, they took that money and someone ran off with it into the Caucasus Islands. I think they got him back. But that's the point is, like, we have to get over that first hurdle of recognizing your enemy. Like there's a saying that says the enemy of my enemy is my friend. we can't look at it enemies that way no more. We have to say the enemy of my enemy is the one that'll slit your throat in the while you're sleeping. That's your enemy. And you have to be able to recognize your enemy. If you can
Right.
recognize your enemy, it's usually too good to be true. It's too good to be true. Not to say that, nothing, I would pray someone like Dr. Martin Luther King would rise up, but we have to do some checks and balances because even he got blackmailed. Even him.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so,
And when that happens, there's that response concerning character. That's one of the reasons why it's so important when you think about this program: educate, motivate, and inspire individuals to rise above life situations and circumstances. There's no threat or anything going on. That's something we do every week. That's something we think every day. And when you do that, then when that comes along, you can then rise to the occasion. But if a person hasn't thought that through, if a person hasn't discovered what they're willing to die for, they aren't living and put to the test at that moment, there's very few people that will give their life for their friend. That's something that you find there in the Bible as well, that discussion about a friend, about what a person will give his life for. And to the point that if a man hadn't found something for which he's willing to die. If you look at the Black Panthers in the position they placed themselves in, if they had not found something for which they were willing to die, they wouldn't have been able to impact the lives of people in the manner in which they did. When I read that little portion about how they took the money and they fed children, I want you to think about that for a moment. They fed children. I was one of those, and it was 66. As I can remember, I don't remember the year, but when they did this, it was 66. I can remember the Feed a Kid programs. People would meet at this location and they'd have these boxes and they come by and you leave home, you go there to eat or whatever the case may be. Those things were good sociably. And to be honest with you, being a child, when we came together, it brought about some positive things, but not even knowing what was going on in the background. So when I saw that's how it came about. When we think back, there are things that lend validity to people, situations, and circumstances. That really gave me a lot to think about with them. I thought about, that 66, and then I remembered what time was it when Dr. King was killed. And I put all this stuff together and I look at it, there was some narratives being created. Our topic really is about there's work to do. If you think about the work that Dr. King was doing, if you think about the work that Brother Malcolm was doing, if you think about what it did to the civil rights movement, if you think about what it did to the Nation of Islam, they had to recover from some things. And then when you think about the thought of the Black Panthers coming forward, what it must have taken in the raw when they got started, to come out there with all that energy, these emotions, and then have those emotions refined to such a manner that you put out a document that has a 10-point plan that will live well beyond you. I mean, they probably wasn't looking at how long it would last, but just that it was what was needed in the moment. It's that type thing that serves as a motivation. And there's a big difference in a motivation and a catalyst. Because when I mentioned Floyd and what was going on with Black Lives Matter, I saw that as a catalyst because I didn't hear the movement. I didn't hear anything that would move me to go out there and get behind what they were doing. I unfortunately had seen too many times where there was actually crimes and things that I thought that we should still be fighting for, but we allowed them to die down. I've seen too many times where people had little issues against the government or against the police, and when they got their money, they were more silent than some of the people that was protesting alongside them. So there's a battle, but it needs to be a strategical battle. And strategy don't go out in the street haphazard. It goes out with an intent. It goes out with a will. And even when it cries, it's understandable because you know what the cry is about. I think it was a great thing that moved all the people. As a matter of fact, I think there were some things that resulted from that that people may not realize. If you think about the black and white people out there in the streets, as you said, Brother Gregory, they moved from killing or threatening just black people to anybody, because that was a united issue. I don't know how united, but you did see both in the streets to the point where they didn't use discretion between white and black. So that is a good thing. But did you notice how behind that education became an emphasis of how they didn't want to teach certain things anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice how that seems to be a correlation between that?
Yes, I do.
When you look at the fact of all of a sudden now we're at a point where we don't want to teach certain topics because people can't take them, even teachers. I was doing a study on teachers, on the impact of critical subjects, critical sensitive subjects. And believe it or not, they were history, they were economics, they were social studies, all the
Mm-hmm.
things that point out the wrong of society. They had issues with teaching because when they came to know them, to came to be knowledgeable of them, it impacted them as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is now, we're at a point where we don't want certain topics taught. You know, it makes the news because this state don't want to do it. This state don't want to do it. So we're gonna show it in the news. We're gonna make people that it's gonna be other things, psychological. It's gonna be everything except what it is, that the truth is sometimes bigger and more painful for people than the lie that they've been living.
Yeah, we gotta keep pushing towards what we want in this life and stop letting this giant system keep us from getting what we deserve. Because prime example, I will give you a perfect example. If you go to any state in the United States and you see the budget for an average public school, let's just say K through 5, elementary school, if you see the budget for that school and then you see the budget for a charter school, which usually supersedes far as learning a public school, you'll notice the charter schools always get less money. Every single state that you go to, charters always get less money because the history behind charters is what a lot of people don't understand. I went to a charter school. Charter schools were for the people that got kicked out of regular school. That's initially what charter schools were for. Or
Right.
they were for the people that didn't get their high school diploma. That's what charter schools were created. But then the people that really taught at charter schools were the people that loved teaching. And they saw the shift that happened probably in the early 2000s, that charter schools started becoming better taught than public schools, and then even better taught than private schools. And then all of a sudden, these charter schools, they started commanding more money because they started signing up more kids. And you know what the government will do to that? They'll say, nope, we're going to cut the funding.
Hmm.
So then they can't sign that many kids up as they would a public school. Whereas they make your kid go to a public school, but if you want to sign them up to a very high level of education for charter school, they only have a couple slots they can fill. And literally, people, parents, and kids go to a lottery every single year just to get picked to go to a charter school
Hmm.
because that's how much better they are. And there's kids and parents crying because they know their kid is not going to get the same education because they know they're not going to get taught economics. They know they're not going to get taught real history. And I was fortunate enough to go to a charter school. They're closed now because the funding was cut. And I was fortunate enough to notice something. I went to a public school that was majority black, I went to a charter school. I went to both schools at the same time. And what I noticed opened up my eyes. And that's why I chose to go to Tuskegee University. What I noticed in a majority black school, black teachers, black principals, they were public school. They did not teach the essential items that I needed to know as an adult going into this world. Matter of fact, I had white teachers at the charter school that taught more black history than the black teachers at my public school. And that's saying something right there. When Black History came around,
Hmm.
that whole charter school changed. If you had to learn something every single day about some black folk. I learned more about my own black people in a charter school full of different ethnic groups than I did in my own black public school. That's a shame.
Right.
That's a shame.
And you know, a reason for that could be, you know, when people are mixed and they're among a mixed crowd, they are less threatened and others appear less threatening. Because when you look at um, the thought of being a strong black man in an environment, it intimidates people. A lot of people, you know, they want to dumb down or whatever when they're in certain environments. Um, for certain reasons. And then, you know, and it just dropped in my mind, you know, that old thing about how people prefer black women to black men. You know, when you think about the difference in a black woman and a black man, it's what black woman is probably a lot more comfortable to be around for someone than a black man, particularly, you know, the things you might say, not to say that they, um, I guess, and I guess I would say there's certain things that you might be able to say around a black woman that black man would probably look at you differently or give you a different response.
Huh?
So,
What's that now? You said it's huh? You must be talking about women your age.
well, actually, I am because, and it's interesting you should say that. That's a show by itself because women, young women and men today, that attitude thing that they bring to the workplace is counterproductive in most
Hmm.
instances.
It
You know,
is.
but see, you laugh, and that's why I say that because the fact that they come, the women at that point were disciplined. You know, there's this saying. I think I don't know if the Willie Lynch letter says it or not, but if you think about it, I think I may have read it in a psychology book, but it says
Hmm.
that women, because of what they've gone through as a woman, they've raised their daughters to be smarter and they've raised their sons to be stronger. So when it comes to how a person might maneuver a certain situation, in the past, women would have done that differently. That young lady might have had that maturity where the young man might have been more like dad, you know, chest all out and all that. So I could see the logic of it, even down to what you just said about today, that difference. If you look at the way women dress, maybe it has something to do with this gay movement or whatever, but there's a lot of
Hmm.
behavior that's different than it was of a young lady or a woman coming up now. There's a lot of lines that are have been blurred, a lot of things that aren't. So it results in a different behavior, and that's a part of when you look at a community, when the behavior changes. If you think about the woman raising the child, and if she is living a certain way or has a certain mindset, it's going to come
Hmm.
out in the child. And I think you know, I'm sure you probably heard of nowadays in that same generation you just laughed about, you got mamas and daughters that'll be going to club and all these other things together.
Okay,
That
so
crap, that
let,
didn't
let,
happen.
okay, let me give you a brief history lesson as to why women in my age group, born in the 80s and 90s and further on, act the way they act. So in 19, I believe it was 72. I think I'm wrong on that date, but it was in the 70s.
Hmm.
The government said, you know what? We understand what happened to the Black Panther group, and the only way we could stop the Black Panther group is that we had to take out these black men. Now we coming under fire for just coming walking out in the street and shooting them. We can't do that no more. So how do we get rid of black men? We have to get rid of black men systemically. So the way they get rid of black men is they take the jobs away from the black men that are out here trying to get jobs. This is back in the 70s. And not only do they take the jobs away from them, they inject the community with drugs. J. Edgar Hoover already said this happened, and the FBI has admitted this happened. So they inject the community with drugs, so the black men cannot work, and they don't want to work because they're high on drugs. Then the black women say, well, who can we turn to in order to help raise these kids? The government said, oh, we'll help you out with that.
Oh,
So they give them some housing, they give them some food stamps, they give them all these things that the black man's supposed to do. And the women said, well, you know what? I don't need a black man because I have everything that I need to live and live comfortably, and I don't have to work as hard. I don't have to work 2 jobs. I could just work 1 job and get everything I need for my kids. And so this happens generation after generation after generation. And then what happens over time is these little black boys, they get raised by women and they don't have a male influence in the house because the black man is gone. The government replaced the black man. And the woman said, I can have babies and I know the government will take care of me. So I don't need to form a bond and a relationship and create a husband and a family and an atmosphere. They said, I don't need to do this no more. And if you notice in the 80s and 90s, there was all these women saying, oh, we don't need no man. We don't need this. We don't need that. And that changed the way black boys looked at other black boys. They started seeing how their mama raised them. They started to see how the females were the leaders and this, that, and the third. And so the black men slowly started to die off. And so here today, now, black men are starting to say, you know what, I'm tired of this. And you hear about the term from black women saying, oh, these black men are going across seas and getting married to Chinese women and Indian women and other African women. And they call them passport boys. They try to demean them. But what's happening is the black men that we were trained up to do and take care of our wife and take care of our kids, these other women from other societies, they are traditional. And even though black women here in America say they want tradition, they actually don't. They actually want a man to pay all her bills. They want him to put food in her belly and she don't have to do nothing. She wants to be propped up and treated like some princess and queen there. She don't have to do nothing. And that's not how the black man and the black woman have survived prior to the 1975. Right. Prior to 1975, marriages were at an all-time high, and then the father was in the home more than 80% of the time. Whereas now, the father's only in the home maybe 5% of the time. Maybe. It might be less than that. And so...
Yeah. Go ahead.
And so the bottom line is that the government has replaced the black man. And so women think they don't need a black man. And therefore, they're raising little black boys that have turned out to be little punks, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And these little black boys, the only thing they know how to do when they get afraid or they come down with adversity is they either kill themselves or they shoot somebody. And they were never taught to deal with adversity by another man. And so these little black boys are getting locked up over frivolous things that the black man, he knew when to just say, bite his tongue and say, nope, that ain't my battle right now. I need to go home to my wife. Or the black man would say, you know what? I don't need to be dealing with this. Let me go home to my wife. But now these little black boys, they slap women, they beat women because they were never taught. Right. They never got their butt whooped by a real black man, punched him in the chest and said, don't you ever touch a woman like that. I got hit in the chest for looking at my daddy wrong. And I turned out to be a great man.
Right.
And
let me jump in, Brother Greg. You said a lot there, and And what you're saying makes total sense. You know, I was in the military, so I've heard a lot of the conversations about the system, but I didn't get to see a lot of it. But now that I've been out and I'm sort of catching up, and to hear you give that analogy, you're entirely correct. One of my favorite movies was Claudine. I don't know if you remember
Hmm.
that movie or not, but it was about that same scenario. In fact, you know, I think the theme song for the show was Mr. Welfare Man. They had it.
Hmm.
They had gone so far as to impact people's benefits if there was a man around. So, you know, when people hear that, you know, depending on, you know, your relation to it, it may sound like, you know, that can't be real, or people making excuses, because as you were speaking, that was my first thought. But we're at a point now where, just as you said about being awake, is very important. But not only must we be awake, it's time we rise. Because see, everything that my brother stated as far as the systemics and the things that we have been exposed to, that was a narrative. And unfortunately, that's not the narrative that they're going to give you, because they're going to give you what their intentions were, or not so much what their intentions were, but what they had hoped to achieve, which was to lift the woman up and to bring the man down. So when you do that, you end up with a household that's kind of reverse. And this Western mindset that's out here now, if you think about civil rights, if I have it correctly, or as I have heard it told and seen it, there was a women's right that followed that. So when you take momentum from one and you give it to another, you are dividing, and the house divided against itself cannot stand. So there's a lot of things that we have endured. And
Hmm.
Brother Gregory, you started off and I know you felt strongly about it, because when you say they, it's easy to use that word they, but it's not applicable at all times, because not all white people are the same. Not all black people are the same. Not all women are the same. Not all men are the same. When I hear women talking about men, or I hear people talking, I will quickly let them know you can't say that's all men, or you can't say that's all women, because we are individuals. That's almost like if you think about the Nation of Islam concept, you can understand it if you really think about it, when they call the white people devils because of what they actually did or whatever was going on. So
Hmm.
when they use that term to refer to all of them, even if it was the majority of them that were, that's still not all of them. We have to be willing to look at the scenario and call it what it is. So if it's I use that same word, there could be just as easily be a black devil as it can a white devil. And people
Hmm.
need to know that people come with their bias and their stereotypes. And sometimes those can be helpful because it prevents you from being too trusting. But we want to acknowledge that, and I do want to say this: um, we're not so closed-minded to say that all of anybody is anything, but at the same time, we're not so ignorant to think that none of anybody can't be or won't be anything. So the reality is, I love what the word says. It says, "Try the spirit by the spirit." So when you come in my space, and I think I can speak for Brother Gregory, and he literally said it. You don't get but so many points, but you're more suspect than you are gifted with points. And by doing that, it keeps a level playing field and keeps everybody involved honest. Brother Gregory, I'm
Yeah.
going to give it back to you, let you comment on anything else you need, and we'll go from there.
I just want us to understand that we're getting ready to come into Black History Month, and it should be Black History Year, not just a month, not the shortest month. Should be Black History Year. We should all learn something about our history, and not just the history they want us to know, but the history we need to know. And I would implore everyone to do your research. The internet is free now. You can find anything you want. Get on the same watch list as me and start Googling these real black groups that did good for our country, that did good for our groups of people. Start getting on the same list as me, and they say, "Oh well, shoot, he's starting to learn something." Uh, I would encourage everyone to just learn your history, not just what they tell you about the Malcolm X's and the Martin Luther Kings. Dig even deeper than that. The NAACP, the United Negro College Fund, the Huey Freemans, the all of them. Like if we can dig just a little bit deeper, you'll find out more about how strong and how resilient we are, and you'll want to move forward from there.
Mhm. Yes, thank you for sharing, Brother Gregory. And as I mentioned to you all, Lady Antoinette normally is a great guest, but on Wednesday she does a program, and I'll let her tell you.
Greetings, peace and blessings. You're invited to Rise to Prosperity, Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. I, Lady Antoinette, and my co-host, Minister Jamie Eatman, would love for you to join us, our panelists, and our conversation room guests Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. as we rise to prosperity.
You've got to rise. And Wednesday, after you have risen, I invite you to join us Friday again.
This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
And I, for one, will join in with anyone. Don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth.
Greetings, I am Jamie Eaton. Join me Fridays at 8 p.m. for On the Rise movement.
Yes, On the Rise movement. And I just had this thought. They tried to reduce Dr. King to a dream. They tried to reduce the Black Panthers, to one man, a comic hero. But let us remember that we are challenged with being the hero, being the agent of change, changing the narrative. There's work to do. I'm ready. How about you? Thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you all